Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana M.A. and
Jackie Sanders. We're two art professionals sharing forth the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
we talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday.
On today's episode, we're so excited to have Lindsay Hebert. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for being on. We're looking forward to discussing how you pivoted towards art and building a community with Weird Productions. But before we dive in, let's go ahead and share a little bit more about your background for our listeners who may not be familiar with you or your work.
Lindsay. Lindsay is a coach for creative entrepreneurs and founder of Weird Productions, a Durham-based event company that reimagines how artists and their communities experience art. She's lived in LA, NYC, Paris, India, China, worked in sales, finance, journalism, and she believes that life experience and grit is more compelling than anything people put on resumes. And I definitely agree.
And of course, that's a very formal introduction. But Lindsay, how would you describe your work and someone who hasn't heard of Weird Productions before?
Yes, we throw the best art shows ever. So if you don't think you're the kind of person that goes to art shows or likes art shows, but you love culture, good food, lots of fun, meeting interesting people, then come to our art shows.
I love that. Yeah, and you definitely put some fun themes on, which we'll definitely dive in into a little bit more. This is not the, pardon my French, this is not the hoity-toity stuff that we're talking about. These are actually like approachable fun. Like these are events that you're like, I can't wait to check it out, and it sounds like fun. But let's dive into your background a little bit before we get into that. So, how have your experiences living in places like all over the United States and even internationally shaped your creative look and the way you approach your work with Weird Productions?
Yeah, I mean, living in China, like that is a weird place. Or India, also weird. LA, extremely weird. New York. So I think that's the common thread through everything. And I've always just loved um, jumping into culture, whatever that means. So food, the way people think. I spent 8 years in China, and even the way like the perception of time works. So in China, people think of time as very circular and cyclical, where we think, in the US, I think it's more linear. But that's definitely something that I've always been interested in and noticed that um, that's essentially like art and creativity. How do different people imagine things?
I love that. I love the idea of circular because definitely when it comes to creativity, it is cyclical. Like there's no art is not a straight line.
And
Creative
however we're
careers are not a
socialized,
straight line.
however we're socialized or raised, it's easy to think that that's just the way. And so through
Yes.
all of my travels and meeting different people, different cultures, you see that we all have completely different stories and ways of going about things. And that's what makes it interesting.
Absolutely.
I love that, especially being able to really dive into each of those cultures, whether from one-off trips or really living in those places. I feel like you get all those varying degrees of understanding, and has also led to a very diverse career for you in terms of professionally working in sales, finance, and journalism. So, what inspired you to really transition all of those experiences, the tools in your tool belt, so to speak, into coaching creative entrepreneurs and founding Weird Productions?
Yeah, so I was in China for 8 years. I was there in January 2020, actually on Chinese New Year holiday, and we started hearing murmurings about this strange virus that was happening in South China where I lived, which we all found out was COVID. And so I ended up, my parents had retired in North Carolina, and so I left China and ended up being back with my parents in North Carolina, which is a very big, very big culture change, very weird.
Yes.
So, a great experience. Um, but then, I was just looking for a creative outlet. I was working remotely for an AI company, building a sales team. And I think I was just really hungry for a creative outlet. And I heard about an art show in San Francisco that was, I believe, a Nicolas Cage art show that they had at a cowboy bar in the Mission in San Francisco. And like a bunch of people ended up showing up. And I just had an idea, maybe a Dolly Parton art show would be cool. Just really thinking I could probably cajole, 10 artists out there that maybe have already done a piece of Dolly work and they'd lend it to us. And then we had about 100 artists apply. 400 people bought tickets, and I think it's a really good lesson in creativity that just go where you find excitement and interest. Like just follow that path because you don't know what's at the end of it. And we just found that we stumbled upon this really interesting intersection of community, arts, culture, a lot of excitement, a lot of togetherness, and Weird Productions grew out of that.
That's so cool, especially with themes like, okay, like Dolly Parton art. That's like a very niche, very specific kind of art call. However, I can imagine because it is so niche, you get such a diverse range of how people interpret that theme or the styles that it's applied to. And it really becomes, to your point with culture, one of those universal experiences of it starts conversation, especially with the pop culture type figure of, oh, did you listen to her music? Do you have an aunt that is obsessed with her? Did your grandmother listen to her growing up? Like, and it's a very niche topic that ultimately starts conversation, which is what art and art shows are all about. So I love that. Such a creative spin on it.
In case Dolly's legal team is listening, it was just Dolly Weird, left very open for interpretation. You may not conjure up thoughts of Dolly Parton, the artist.
Fair, fair.
Could be a doll, could be the sheep, it could be anything. But I think what we try to do and is kind of our bigger why for doing these projects is that, if Dolly Parton just appealed so broadly, it was COVID, so she had been funding vaccine research.
Mhm.
It was really interesting. We asked all the artists to tell us what inspired them about Dolly. A lot of queer folks found her extremely supportive and accepting. People from the South really appreciated the way that she branded herself as a Southerner with all of this kindness and love. And that was something they appreciated from her. So what was really cool that happened was you have people, just like you said, that come at the idea of Dolly in so many different ways, but they all come into the same room together. And then suddenly you have this extremely diverse group looking around that would maybe never be in a space together. And so that's what we try to do that I think might be a little different than the more traditional gallery model is it seems like the same kind of folks feel comfortable in art spaces, that's just the reality of it. And it's somebody who's like, well, I'm just a Dolly Parton fan and this looks interesting, might not be that. We can bring them in on the appreciation of art where maybe they wouldn't see themselves in a museum or gallery space normally.
Yeah, and I love that you made that connection. Well, or the folks that were applying made that connection. I don't know if you've all ever seen it. So in Asheville, there's actually a mural of Dolly Parton and RuPaul from the the drag race show. And it's super cool. I mean, it's worth looking at. But yeah, I don't know when it happened, that transition into she became an icon, for a lot of different groups. And I absolutely love that. It wasn't just the people that like her kind of music and that's it. It's like she became an icon and just a hero for a lot of different people. I don't know. She's pretty awesome. I'm like, I like her. Okay, controversial. I'm like, I like her more for the things she's done than necessarily the music itself, although I do like some of the music, but not the genre itself. It's not my jam, if that makes sense. So I'm like, I love how she can be like, she can be an icon for a lot of different people. I don't know. She's a cool one. I can't wait for another one for you to pick that's just gonna be like, oh my gosh, especially
We
if they're like
we
living
did
in
Prince.
contemporary.
We did Prince, and Prince was pretty incredible. as well.
Prince, yeah, Prince was a cool one too, but already passed away versus Dolly still being around. So I don't know. I can't wait to see the next one. But okay, so with all that, so obviously Prince, Dolly, we see there's a pattern here for really cool stuff. And of course, some of the things that you are known for, Weird Productions is known for, is warehouse parties and art salons and just unconventional, art exhibitions. Question to you then is, how do these events create new ways for artists and their communities to experience art besides the topic, which, we just covered? Obviously, the subject matter is already interesting, but how else do they connect?
Yeah, so we operate on three values. So one is that artists equal VIPs, right? So that is a theme that's consistent. We love hearing about the artist backstories, their inspiration, whatever they want to share. We give them buttons, and so we really try to center the artists as much as possible and kind of invite the community to come in and appreciate being part of the story of folks who have chose such a creative, unconventional path. The second thing is weird over the norm. So we always try to just bring a lot of joy. We like to make people think and just juggle their shake their brains a little bit, like how we arrange chairs, or how we imagine what an art event is, or what a Twinkie is, or we always just try to make it like create something different, a different kind of experience. And then the last thing is we want art to be approachable and easy and fun. So all the art at our events is for sale. It's at a price point that a lot of folks can afford. Like, we've got pieces from $15 to $1,500. And so we want people to feel that they can be art collectors, and that coming into a space, having an experience, meeting an artist, having an amazing night, that you can spend, a few $100 and bring something home that you're going to remember that night forever, and create a connection with someone in the community. Let's say
Yeah,
those
and those
three.
are price points where even artists could collect from other artists as well. And I mean, it's extra special too when they get to meet them in person. And then it's like, oh, you have this for $50. I can do that. Or maybe they trade. You never know, right? But I
I mean,
love that.
like, my bigger dream is I want people to purchase art in the same way that they purchase wine. So people buy a really nice bottle of champagne for $100 or $150. They have a story about
Yeah.
where they got it in France, or, the local grower or whatever. I want people to have that same
Mm.
story to tell about the art in their homes.
You are preaching to the choir with that one. You cannot see my home currently on video screen, but that is something that I try to share with any artist, but also friends of. That's always my souvenir anytime I'm traveling, is okay, trying to find some like offshoot gallery that has local artists or local pop-ups, to really commemorate that event or that girls trip or that wedding. It's okay, buy a cutting board from a local woodworker, to really ground it in the people of that area, which is so fun. And I
And
love how, good. I said, I love how what you're doing is really supporting that too. It's building a place for not only artists to go, to display their work, but also for quote unquote non-artists, which is opens up another debate, but for non-art making people, to go and celebrate the culture in their community, to have that space.
yeah, and as like I'm not an artist, I don't identify as an artist, but for all the artists who are listening, understand what a huge privilege it is to purchase and to buy and collect your art. Like, it's incredible. And so never like lose sight of like how like the opportunity that you're giving your collectors.
So, so true. I love that. Now, when thinking about kind of the mindset of artists today, what barriers do you see artists facing, and how do you feel like Weird Productions aims to break down those specific barriers, to make art more approachable?
I like to think of them as opportunities. I think if we look at society, like from a larger scope, there's a lot of divisiveness. We have an election going on. I think we're seeing a lot of the old models of how business runs, how society runs, how government runs are like not serving folks in the same way. And I truly believe that artists, the way they think outside the box, the way they think creatively, just have such a gift to give to society in the hardest times. I mean, if we think about artists, they literally make art out of trash. Literally.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. And so I think the barriers that exist are that they don't maybe fit within the traditional models, whether that's a 9 to 5 job or that's knowing exactly what you're doing and how it's going to turn out, and having goals and objectives and following the plan. I don't think that always works into society in the best way, but I also think that artists are so uniquely gifted in navigating in their own ways. And of course, we get a lot of stories from society about how artists are irresponsible or they don't know how to do business, et cetera, et cetera. But I like to turn that and say, you are so much more equipped than like a consultant to figure out a creative solution because you're an artist. That's how your brain works.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think with Weird Productions, what we try to show everybody is there's a really fun way to sell art. There's a really fun way to find your collectors. And it doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to be a slog. It can just be like a really lovely community connection that, pays your bills.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I mean, and we definitely are believers in the idea that, like, as artists, basically we're problem solvers. And that definitely can translate, like, even for those folks that don't see themselves as artists, at least give yourself permission to call yourself a creative. Because if you're trying to figure out what to cook for dinner tonight and you're looking at the pantry and you're like calculating what goes into what, or you're a computer programmer and you're trying to make something come into existence out of nothing, right? Like maybe, or a scientist, like there's so many different industries where you may not think what the creativity part of it is. And at the end of the day, it all can translate from one side to the other, to the other, to the other. And, for some people that turns into making music someday, maybe on the side, or gardening, or making visual art, making paintings and things like that. But yeah, I love that idea of like, yeah, you have to kind of be open to it and understand that, yeah, it is a privilege to be able to translate the world around you, whether it's the good, the bad, or the ugly, and translate it into something that perhaps is more positive. Yes, political environment is tense. Can you turn it into something, either a discussion piece or a political commentary on your artwork, or maybe it's just I don't really want to talk about it and I just want to look at something beautiful and that's going to make me happier and help me move on through the hard days, right? Like it's all valid. So, yeah, I definitely love that. Now, what would you say is the role that community plays in your events, and how do you ensure that artists are always at the forefront of the experiences you create? I know you mentioned a little bit about artists being the VIP. If you want to go into that a little deeper.
Yeah, well, I think in the traditional art model, there's a lot of focus put on like the curator or the gallery. And we just genuinely adore all of our artists. So, like I said, like I'm not an artist, so my work's not on display. And I'm always my excitement is around, again, the honor of being able to show people's work. And I still sometimes don't believe that like artists I'm like, really, you're gonna just give this beautiful thing to me to hold and put on a wall? It's still amazing to me. So yeah, and I think we've created a real community with the artists where I love to see, like at Prince for Prince, for example, we hang over 100 pieces. So folks come in and they're trying to find their piece, and then they'll run into another artist, be like, oh, that's yours, mine's next to yours. And then, they'll meet each other, and it's just very cool. I like see they follow each other on Instagram and have shared a lot of opportunities with each other. So I think like we exist to support the artists, and we very much see, like, while we partner with artists and we share a commission on their work, the artists aren't our customers, they're our business partners. And that's how Weird Productions will always be. We don't charge, application fees or anything like that. So, there are a lot of things just built into our business model that make sure the artists are our partners. And then as far as the community, like, every event we have is collaborative. I mean, I don't even think it would be accurate to say we hire like vendors or performers. Whenever we work with, we work with a wine bar, we work with a restaurant, we work with a chef. It's always about, like, what do they want to create? What's their vision? We worked with Spray J, who's an amazing drag performer, that was like did print, they do Prince drag, and just absolutely incredible. But it's all about reaching out and saying, okay, like, what's your dream performance and how do we make that happen? We're not just hiring someone to come in and, can you sing and dance for 30 minutes and we'll pay you. So I think that's part of it too. And like, all of our events are very collaborative.
I love that, especially from that pairing of like resources, opportunity, and space with the creative vision. Because oftentimes, and that's what we talk about with so many other visual artists, but I'm sure performing artists as well, of I just need like a big open white room that I can make my work in as a studio or display my work as a display. And so really pairing those two things sounds like a wonderful collaboration. And I love that shift of mindset of the artists being partners, because it really is that two-handed approach, that often the quote unquote traditional art world can get a little criticism for not acknowledging the mutual need of a gallery with the artist, but also artists with the gallery. So that kind of leads me to my next question, though, with this different model kind of challenging the norms. You've obviously sold hundreds of pieces of art for local artists in a very short amount of time, which is amazing. So do you have any like success stories that really illustrate the impact of this new approach in terms of exposure for new artists or networking connections, community, as you mentioned?
Yeah, so I just did the math this morning because we had an event we had a salon 2 weeks ago, and we're at $22,800 that we've made for artists in less than a
So
year.
amazing.
And that's like direct checks that we paid for artists' work.
Wow.
Yeah, so can you restate the question?
Yeah. So do you have any success stories on how the impact of your different than the norm approach has had impact in the community?
Yeah, so I think the most exciting thing for me is watching people. I think being involved with us creates, and again, this is very much a privilege that I still pinch myself about, but I think just creating a way for people to be real artists, and they are real artists, but they just haven't quite made that connection in their own head. Like, we've started like Instagrams with people, like at an event, we'll start their Instagram. We'll have them in a show. So it's like, well, now you have an Instagram that says you're an artist and you're in an art show. So I don't think you can make the argument you're not a real.
It's almost like, okay, what other excuses do you have to claim
Yeah.
that you're not an artist? Oh, well, you just sold your first painting. So like, try to tell me you're not an artist now. Yeah. So much of it is that like personal permission of, well, once I hit this milestone, then I'll be a real artist. Or once I do this, and you're kind of like, okay, we're taking those steps with you. What other excuses do you got?
I think in like, again, Dollywood was really just a fun project that has grown into so much more. And I think what we've proven in a few weeks, under a year, is that, one, people buy art, and people buy all kinds of art. So Prince for Prince, we sold a $15 paper doll that was a sort of anime style sketch of 1999 with like a bare ass out. And then we sold a $1,000 piece that was a still life of 1999 of like Y2K with all these objects from 1999 that was painted over an IKEA stock print that we gave away to the artist. And the artist describes herself as like YouTube top. And
Huh.
she's in marketing and she's the mom. And so who's to say, like, I just now I'm like, no one gets to say what art is. So like on that scale, the people who purchased the art decided that they wanted to collect that art. And so to just have such a broad range of prices, experiences. And then we also had, you know, professional full-time artists that sell for, you know, many thousands of dollars on the walls as well. So it's really like who gets to choose. And I think the answer is the person who's buying the art gets to choose.
I love
And
that. Hey, if it resonates, right?
if it resonates, and like we just I love that those are our numbers, like $15, $1,000, every range. We had a life coach drive down from Virginia. She came to Dolly Weird. She decided she's a cancer survivor. Sent us 3 pieces, said just keep the money if they sell, or you can just keep them. So we put them up. We put prices on them, sold all 3. It was her first art show. Doing this art was kind of a, you know, part of her cancer recovery and refining her creativity. And we sold all 3 of her pieces. It's like, you've like sold out your first show. Amazing. So again, like there are no rules.
Oh, I love that so much. Well, what are some of the challenges that you have faced in building weird productions, and how have these experiences helped shape your vision? I
Um,
imagine finding a venue is probably near the top of the list.
it's I think one of the great parts about this project has been because I don't have an art background, I didn't even know the rules to follow. So I've just kind of made intuitive choices about everything. So of course there's been a good amount of pushback about like how legitimate we are, or, you know, again, like I think people are just can be resistant to change. So I would say just understanding that everyone's invited, no matter what, everyone's invited to take part. And I don't know, I'm trying to think. I probably the bigger challenge is just like the startup like having a startup and being an entrepreneur and rolling with the ups and downs and making a lot of choices and being under a lot of pressure. And you know, I take it very seriously that I'm, you know, in possession of all this work that people have created, and I want folks to come to our events and like have the night of their lives. And you know, that's just the standard we try to operate on. So it's a high bar. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of like self-coaching, a lot of coaching, a lot of therapy. Um, but yeah, I would say it's all pretty normal stuff.
No Normal stuff while challenging the norm, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Oh, I
trying to think.
love that so much.
It's even funny because people make a lot of assumptions like, oh, artists, so hard to work with artists. Like, I think artists are great. Like, I haven't had a lot of I mean, we've worked with hundreds of artists now, and you know, you have, oh, I'm trying to think of it better. You guys will have to edit this, but maybe like for me, the biggest, so I'm creating a collaborative community experience. And so when we do have creative differences, that's tough. And it hasn't happened many times, but I think in just the boundary setting and kind of having to let some things go, you know, when you have those major differences of opinions or operating, that's probably the hardest, because I want there to be this positive energy in the community, and that's not always possible, unfortunately.
That's okay, because I'm like, that's gonna happen in any industry. Like,
Yes.
I worked in investment finance, talk about high pressure and navigating personalities to keep it very diplomatic. And yeah, you gotta you got to try to do the best you can and try not to take it too personal and move on
Yeah,
and
and
focus on the positive.
it's something I think in these times is very valuable to recognize too, that we're in community together. We're
Mhm.
specifically inviting people to be weird and creative. And we're going to live in community with people that we don't particularly like. And like that's totally fine. That's totally fine. And if people don't like us or what we're doing or me or like that's cool. Like we can
Yeah.
still all live in the same space and be generally supportive of each other.
Yeah. And in increasing our exposure to other quote unquote weird people, we normalize that a lot of them are not that weird and we actually get along. And or now we self-identify as weirder than we did before. And that's not a bad thing.
Exactly. I'm like, all right, we're all just doing our best out here. So, you
Yeah, we
know,
can. We try. Now, Lindsay, what advice would you give to artists or creative entrepreneurs that are looking to build their unique platforms of event? I'm sure some of our listeners, have the ideas cooking now, but where do they even start? What advice would you give?
so I would give the advice to relinquish control or to realize that the magic of an event is the experience that is spontaneously created by your guests and wherever they are in that moment. So maybe they're on a date, maybe they're on a terrible date, maybe they're going to get proposed to, maybe they like have had a horrible day and they drag themselves out of bed. Like you have no control over that. You also have folks that are, whatever, their burger is going to be burned and they can't see the light properly. And all these things are going to happen outside of your control. And all you can do is be really genuinely excited for what you're going to offer them. And do the best you can to make sure like the details are in order and then just buckle up and
Roll
go on
with
the ride.
it. Just
Yeah.
I
roll
love
with it.
that advice because I think it's so true. Oftentimes, I mean, as artists, but especially anyone hosting an event or just experiencing the world, honestly, like you can have these expectations of if it doesn't go this exact way, then like it's a total failure, where you have too many assumptions or expectations beforehand. Where, yes, you want to be prepared and professional and have your titles and labels and your prices on things, but ultimately, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. And all you can do is make the most of the thunderstorm that came out of nowhere that kind of has everyone huddled under tents. All you can do is be like, you know what, it is scorching hot outside. So let's make the most of it. We're all in this experience together. Because yeah, you can't control anything else outside of that.
We literally dolly weird. So our first event, I didn't wake up. And mind you, this is the first time I've done any art installation. So I didn't wake up to my alarm. And we had to, within a few hours, like day of the event, install 120 pieces of art for the first time. My alarm didn't go off because the power was out and it was
Uh-oh.
raining. And so we had to wait for it to stop raining so we could load the art. And then half of our crew spent most of the day just trying to put a tarp up to cover the barbecue cooking area. So yeah, absolutely. But the point is that whatever you can imagine as the best case scenario, you can't predict it. So just get excited to see it happen.
I love that. Well, speaking of excited to see things happen, can you tell us more about your upcoming Canvas Clash event that you're hosting?
Yeah, so speaking of communities and partnering and collaboration, so we have 12 artists. One is a wild card secret artist that are going to do an art battle. So it's 3 rounds of speed painting. And we're working in collaboration with the Durham Art Guild and 21C, who has generously given us their ballroom. And it's gonna be a really fun event. And I actually think we only have 100 tickets, which is quite low, I think, for this kind of an event. But that's the capacity of the ballroom. But it's gonna be very high energy, very fun. We have a couple weird artists that we've worked with that are involved. But like a really diverse group of like styles and people, and it will be very fun. And then the audience gets to vote on their favorite and bid on the art that's created.
Oh,
That's
love
so
that.
cool.
And the 21C Durham Hotel, for our listeners who may not be familiar with, they have so much art in there. I mean, they have their own art gallery in it, and it's something else. This is not your cookie cutter hotel situation either. I mean, the pink penguin situation, you guys can Google it.
Okay,
It's
so let me
it's
tell you about
something
the pink
else.
penguins. So the pink penguins, this is where like the weird comes in. So we were trying to think of how we're going to market this event. And so I was asking John Blanco, who's helping us out. I was like, okay, like could we put like, a hat on the penguin? He's like, no, the penguins are works of art, and they have like a whole list of rules when it comes to the penguins and how you're allowed to treat the penguins and dress, you're not allowed to dress the penguins. And so I'm like, and it's like this thought creeps in like, the art world. And then like he's like, but we do have a mascot costume. I'm like, what? You have a, why did you lead with that? So 21C, you heard it here first, has a pink penguin mascot suit. And that suit has no rules. No rules.
It's a theater first.
That's amazing.
I'm like, we don't need the artwork. Get out that costume.
Don't touch the sculpture. Don't touch the pink penguin sculptures, but the mascot costume.
Oh
I
yeah.
love it.
So we're very excited to get the penguin out and about town.
Yes. Guest
getting-
appearance, celebrity sighting. I love it. Well, for people, if they're interested in that event, when exactly is that event and where can people get tickets?
Saturday, November 7th, and I can
Awesome.
give you the link.
Awesome.
It'll be on our website, and it's on our Instagram, and yeah.
Awesome. Sounds good. And if artists cannot get tickets, I'm sure we'll be sharing a bunch on social media, and I look forward to seeing some videos of that pink penguin costume because it sounds like it'll be fun. And up next, Lindsay, we love to ask our guests how they define success. But first, we're going to take a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist courses.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there. So what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold, so you don't have to waste your time going down those endless rabbit holes.
In addition to weekly calls, we have created video course modules to cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, artist mindset, PDF resources, templates, and so much more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartists.com to learn more, get immediate access, and level up your career today.
Welcome back, everybody. So, question we love to ask all of our guests is, how do you define success, in your case, as a creative entrepreneur?
I think you're just doing the thing. You're just doing the thing that you love to do. And it's not always amazing, but it's the thing that makes you happy. That's success enough. The money will come.
Love it. Very simple. And now, what is one piece of advice you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey?
So I don't know if you've seen the movie Surf's Up, but it's about surfing penguins.
Mm-hmm.
My coach actually told me this, so there's this character called Big Z, and he's like a storied emperor penguin that's like the first amazing surfer penguin. And so he goes through the barrel of the wave, and then and people are like, oh no, he's gonna die, the wave's gonna crush him. And then he comes out the other side, and then he turns and he bows to the wave. And so I'm pretty type A, and coming from like finance and tech and coming into the creative world and trying to do something totally new, I was struggling a lot with the feelings of like, I don't have my shit together, I'm not organized, I don't know where I'm going, there are no systems in place. And I guess that metaphor, which my coach actually gave me, is just this idea that that's the process, that's the creative process. And you just got to ride the wave, and it's not going to feel organized and like you're on top of it and you're in full control, but that's the excitement of the journey. So when you start feeling like all the chaos and the overwhelm, you just got to be like, just bow to the wave. And I think nothing's gone wrong. Has gone wrong if you think you're going to drown. Like, that's a normal part of the process.
That means you're in the right path if
Yes.
you feel that way.
Yes, just hold on and you'll come out the other side and you can honor that experience.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm like, right away. That's all I could think of, honestly. That is so good.
It's a great movie. Like, so many
Yeah.
great gems.
Okay, I haven't seen it, but I like these references for sure. And coming from a corporate environment, I can definitely relate to you come from a system of structure and you come in at a certain time and you leave at a certain time and there's a certain number of tasks you have to do. And usually there's like managers and HR and accounting and there's like all these departments. And then suddenly when you're solo, you're all of the departments at the same time and there's no preset schedule. So you're like, but I just want to make art. So, yeah, you got to balance all the things. So yeah, we all understand that challenge, but I like that idea of just ride the wave and then wait, and then greet the wave, honor the process. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens at, I think, every state of business, but the problem with trying to meet goals and being really rigid in those expectations, you don't leave space to evolve. So what I realized, I kept trying to create systems to make myself feel better, but then we would evolve faster than the systems could, get in place. So by the time we had a system, it was no longer relevant. And that's actually a really good thing. It's a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
Your brain tells you something's gone wrong, you're not on top of it, you're a mess, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like, no, you know what? Like, it's going to be messy. You're creating something new.
Yeah, and I think whether it's establishing systems or even just like overthinking the creative process in general, many artists face that where they're like, oh, well, I need to have detail number 7 figured out in my business before I even start doing step number 2. And just like, well, no, do step number 2 because you may pivot into a new direction to where that's not even relevant anymore. So yes, I've definitely been in similar situations. That's a very type A systems oriented person. I feel your pain on that. And you're like, let me make an SOP for this. And now I'm like, well, now my documentation is totally out of date because we changed everything. So
Yeah, I coach creative entrepreneurs and artists, and even with, I've coached a couple courses where they really want me to teach business plans, and I just refuse to do it because I'm like, you have no idea what you're doing. All you're
right.
doing in creating a business plan is making yourself feel better. That is an exercise for your nervous system. So why don't we just deal with your nervous system and then go out in the world and do your thing, serve your coffee, make your art, like throw your party, and then learn from that. But you're not going to learn from a business plan. You're just going to sit in a room and tell stories.
So true. So
Oh,
true.
that's so fun. Oh, I'm like
You're like,
listening. I'm like, there's a little thought bubble with my marketing and business professors floating right now. Don't listen to her. You need a business plan. But no, you're right. Especially with creative businesses, it's not as simple as how many units do we need to manufacture and what's the profit margin on each and what are our distribution channels? And then we got it figured out. It's like, so yeah, no, it's definitely not that structured.
yeah.
Take the stuff, go to a market. These ones sold, these ones didn't sell. Like, market research, you've done it. Like, don't do that on the computer. Do that with other humans.
Yeah.
I push back against those. I mean, I also think we just try so hard to make it more difficult than it is. And it's like, think about, did your grandparents have, like, my grandparents had a camper business. They like made campers. Like, they didn't, I don't even think they graduated from high school. They didn't, I promise you, they did not have a business plan. It was just like a camper business. They're like, my grandma could sew, my grandpa did woodworking, and they opened a shop. Like, but there was no like customer research. They just
Right.
went opened their shop and were like, "Do you like our stuff?"
Right. You mean they didn't analyze their customer acquisition cost
Yeah,
and then mock
exactly.
up their budget for it?
Exactly. Like, people ask me, okay, I want to know my ideal customer. I'm like, yeah, what's their name? And they're like, no, it's like women over the age of, between the ages of 35 and 45. I'm like, no, what's her name? What's her name? That's your customer. Like,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
big guy. And we see that at art shows. It's like, who's your customer? Like that guy paid money.
That guy who just bought my
Yeah.
piece, he's my customer.
Use that as your starting point. Yeah. And then pivot, 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 pivot. I think that's the name of the game with creative businesses. But if someone were to hand you $100 randomly, what would you splurge it on or invest in? Has to something that brings you joy and relates to your art business.
So what I really want to order is, those, we really like workwear and like patches and tape and like kind of grungy underground stuff. But I want to get those, those patches that go on workwear with like people's, this is like how.
Yes.
That's say weird.
Ooh, I love that. I love that as a merch idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
if you have that, I'm like, I wear coveralls, dude. I
Yeah.
would totally buy a patch that says weird at one of your events.
All right. We'll send you
Let me
one.
know. Okay.
I love
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
Man, well, in case someone wants to get their hands on one of those future patches, maybe at a future event, what exciting projects or events do you have coming up that our listeners should know about in addition to the Canvas Clash event coming up?
All right. So on October 18th, Friday, October 18th, we are doing for the first time a fashion show, if you're in the Triangle area, called Raleigh Renaissance. Big collaboration, 6 local designers. All of the models are local celebrities. So really cool, weird people that are leaders in the community that do a lot of different creative things and are just excellent people around town. So they'll be modeling looks by local designers, and there will be surprises and fun shopping experience incorporated in that. But yeah, it's our first fashion event with fashion as art. So yes, we're going to release that soon. I'll send you the links to everything, and yeah, it'll be a fun time.
Awesome. I love it. Already marking my calendars for that. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Before we go, how can listeners stay in contact with you after they listen to today's episode?
We are on Instagram at weirdproductions.art, and that is also our website, weirdproductions.art. So I am in there a lot. So if you want to DM me, I'll be there to answer. And otherwise, we'll just, get your email on our list so you know when all the events drop.
Amazing. Well, we're going to link everything in the show notes. And of course, we're excited to see the continued growth of Weird Productions and all the amazing events that you have in store. So thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Love hanging with you guys.
Oh, we loved it. Well, in the meantime, for our listeners, if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at May Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio across all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artists on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.